my fellow people of the former British Southern Cameroon, the children of Ambazonia, and also citizens of the world that listen to our programs. This evening, I want to talk about the confiscated true independence of the children of Ambazonia, how it was manipulated. We are just a week into 1st of October. That is when the Southern Cameroons, the British former Southern Cameroons, was granted independence by the United Nations. It is really the right time to examine this. It also happens to be the time that La Republique is attempting to pretend to hold an election. I think they said October 12th. So this is really an opportune time for us to examine what truly happened when the children of the former British Southern Cameroon, now supported or purportedly living in the northwest and southwest regions of La Republique du Cameroon, what happened to their independence. And so I would like to examine that today and give some details to help our people to understand what happened to us and why we are going through the hardship that we're going through right now. Now, starting first, I would like to help us to understand that La Republique du Cameroon has never truly had any independence. The French were never interested in granting independence to any African nation. Actually, not only the French, even the British were not interested in granting true independence to any African nation. It is the United States that insisted that any country that was not ruling themselves autonomously, that means by their own local indigenous people, should be granted independence by their colonial masters after the Second World War and the formation of the United Nations. So these two countries, Britain and France, which were heavily indebted during the Second World War, were reluctant to grant independence to their colonies, and they literally conspired to manipulate and pretend to have granted independence and brought in people that they have basically prepared, people that look like us, that look like local indigents, but they are no longer serving the interest of the locals, but serve the interest of the colonial masters. And that's what happened, and it's well exemplified by La République du Cameroon. As we had said in previous programs, the French made sure that they eliminated any person opposing their control of La République du Cameroon, like the UPC. They made sure that any people who threatened the life, people they wanted to use, like Ahijo and others, they killed them. And so they went after Nyobe and others and eliminated them and did everything possible to wipe them out, to preserve those that they can use. And so they manipulated. They hadn't been their first who was working with them, but because they did not trust him very well, they brought in Ahijo to take over, and Ahijo was now controlling that country when they were purportedly granted independence on January 1 of 1960. That's when La République du Cameroon had its independence. We had already moved from Enugu and were practicing our own self-governance in Boya under British supervision and under some British control, but we were able to conduct elections and change government, and we had an experience in democracy which I said in previous programs La République does not have. The French manipulate everything that happens there to ensure that only those people that they want are in power and rule the country to their benefit of the French. So the French signed an agreement with Ahijo just about a week before they handed over the so-called independence to La République du Cameroon. And I would like to read here those 11 points of agreement that the French signed with Ahijo. Number one, the French insisted that that Cameroon must pay its colonial debt. That means they must pay a debt to France for French investments in Cameroon during the time of colonialism. So that was one. The second one was an automatic confiscation of national financial reserves. That means all the financial reserves of the country, the French confiscated it. The country had to keep all its money in France and would have to go back to France and borrow a portion of that money and even pay back what they had borrowed with interest. The French controlled all of that. The third one was the right to first refusal of any raw or natural resources discovered in the country. That means all known natural resources of the country belong to France, and any new resources discovered belong to France, and France would have the first right to exploit them for its benefit. And if the French were not interested in anything, that's when the country may use it for their own benefit or make an agreement with other nations. The fourth, the priority for French interests and companies in public procurement and public tenders. That means all economic activities, whether it is in pharmacy, like you see French pharmacies selling drugs, or construction, like we knew about Razel, that was pretending to be constructing roads that always got bad after a short while. All major companies and economic activities will be controlled by French companies. Then number five, exclusive right to provide military equipment and train military officers of the colonies. That means only the French would be training military officers in La République du Cameroon and provide military equipment. Those old things. Remember that the French were defeated by the Germans during the 1870 war, the First World War, and during the Second World War. France does not have any serious experience in military things, and they don't have any sophisticated military equipment. But they were compelling their colonies that they will have to buy French military equipment, and the French will have to train their military. And in fact, like Traore indicated, the French train this military and keep some to make sure they protect French interests. And if the president that the French are using tends to defect from doing what the French want, then the French will literally revive those individuals in the military that they have trained to take over as a so-called coup d'etat. So all of the so-called coup d'etats in French colonies were instigated by Paris, the French presidency. Then number six, the right for France to deploy troops and intervene militarily in the country to defend its interests. So whenever French interests are threatened, France has the right to intervene militarily to defend its rights, which is happening. The French ambassador in Yaoundé has been a military general so far. I think they just tried to change him, but whatever the case, the French ambassador controls every political activity that occurs in the country. Number seven, the obligation to make French the official language of the country and the language for education. That means they must use French as their official language in all aspects as well as education. In fact, it reached the point where even the pretended union between the former British Southern Cameroon and La République du Cameroon, the so-called president, the one who sits there calling himself president, it seems to be ashamed to make public speeches in the English language. He insists only on talking in French because he's afraid of his French masters. Number eight, the obligation to use the CFA franc as the colony money. Although this system is not shared by other European countries, the French colonies are forced to use the French CFA, which is produced by France for those countries. They print the picture of the president and print some few images like a young, beautiful girl or animals or farming farms that you notice products on the money. But it's produced by France and controlled by the French. So they were obliged to do that. Number nine, the obligation to send to France an annual, every year, balance sheet, and before, on the state of reserves, no report, no money. So they had to give a report to France of everything concerning the economic activity and money of the country. And if they don't give any report, France will not give them any money. These are countries that are supposed to be independent, but France controls everything, including their money. That is why even after the so-called fake national dialogue, Biya had to go to France to give a report to the French president how the so-called national dialogue went, because he can only act on what the French tell him. He has no freedom. Number 10, renounce any military alliance with other countries unless authorized by France. That means these colonial countries must only do military activities with the French, and they could only collaborate with other countries when France permits it. So, number 11, the obligation to ally with France in the event of any war or global crisis. So anytime there is a war anywhere, they must collaborate with the French. France would control everything that is going on there. So this is the situation that happened when La République was acquiring its independence. And he just signed this agreement 1 week before France granted them the fake independence of January 1, 1960. So Ahidjo was tied with this string when he was proposing things to us, the children of former British Southern Cameroon, about the plebiscite that was forced on us. We said that our independence was compromised. They indicated that our forefathers had requested for true independence, but the British, in collaboration with the French, insisted that we must either go back to join Nigeria that the British will control, or we join La République du Cameroun that the French will control. And in exchange, the British and the French had an agreement that if the former British Southern Cameroon voted to join La République du Cameroun, the French will give Britain £2 million in exchange for their investments in West Cameroon, and then own us. And that's what happened. And so our independence was compromised. And so the plebiscite, where we were compelled to vote to either join Nigeria or La République du Cameroon, in previous programs I indicated that Nigeria proposed that we will be a fourth region, just like the eastern region around where you have the Igbos, then the western region where you have the Yorubas, and the northern region where you have the Muslims. We would be an autonomous separate region from all of those. So fourth of those regions in Nigeria. But Ahidjo made some promises. Remember, under control of the French were manipulating Ahidjo to give this false assurance. And this was on in February of 1961. Remember, La République had its independence on January 1, 1960. So this was over a year after La République had its independence. Ahidjo, speaking in the United Nations Decolonization Committee, proposed that if we voted to join La République du Cameroun, the two territories will be united, but they will maintain their respective institutions. The Southern Cameroons will keep its own administration, its own parliament, and its own laws. Number two, we have promised, that's what Ahidjo said, and we solemnly reaffirm or swear that the institutions of the Southern Cameroons will be respected. We will not annex the Southern Cameroons. Number three, the union between the two territories will be a federal one, with each territory maintaining its autonomy and institutions. We will respect the cultural and linguistic differences between the two territories. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own educational system, its own legal system, and its own administrative system. The Southern Cameroons will have its own government, its own parliament, and its own laws. We will not impose our institutions on the Southern Cameroons. We are not seeking to annex the Southern Cameroons. We want a union based on equity, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. The union will be a voluntary one, and the Southern Cameroons will be free to withdraw from it if it so chooses at any time. We will not use force or coercion to maintain the union, to force them to stay with them. We will create a federal state where the two territories will be equal partners. The Southern Cameroons will have its own premier, that's prime minister, its own ministers, and its own civil service. The union will be based on principles of democracy, liberty, and justice. We will respect the rights of all citizens regardless of their origin or language. We will promote economic development and social progress in both territories. We will work together to build a prosperous and happy future for all Cameroonians. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own judicial system, its own police force, and its own defense force. We will not impose our security forces on the Southern Cameroons. We will respect the cultural heritage of both territories. We will promote the development of both English and French languages in our country. We will establish a federal government with a president and a prime minister and a council of ministers. The Southern Cameroons will have its own representatives in the federal government. The union will be based on the principles of equality, justice, and mutual respect. We will work together to build a united and prosperous Cameroon. We will promote economic cooperation and development between the two territories. We will work together to build roads, bridges, and other infrastructure. The Southern Cameroons will maintain its own educational system with its own curriculum and its own certificates. We will recognize the certificates and diplomas of both territories. We will respect the traditional institutions and customs of both territories. We will work together to promote the cultural heritage of our country. The union will be a voluntary one, and either territory can withdraw from it at any time if it so chooses. We will not use force or coercion to maintain the union. These were the promises that Ahidjo made when we were going to vote at the plebiscite. But you can see here that Ahidjo was already telling a lie, because he already signed agreements with the French a week before their independence on January 1 of 1960. I need to remind us again, the French insisted not only controlling the finances and resources of the country, but that French is going to be the main language of the colony, in this case, the Republic of Cameroon, and that the educational system will be controlled by the French at all levels, from primary, maternal level, all the way to university level. So you notice here when Ahidjo that they will respect our educational institution and our linguistic difference, he was telling a lie. And that is the camouflage that the French do. They speak with one mouth and do something different behind. And they have carried this over to their colonies, which we are experiencing in La République du Cameroun. Because all these promises that Ahidjo made to us before we voted in the plebiscite have all been violated. And it's because the French are guiding every activity in French Cameroon, in La République du Cameroun. So, one, we realized that the promises were made by Ahidjo, and I want to emphasize here that Ahidjo is now dead. He died in 1989 and is buried in Senegal. He was born in 1924. Different individuals who were not in these discussions, who were never present in the United Nations, are the ones now making these decisions led by the French and oppressing and killing our people because of the resources of the land. So, based on these promises, the activities of these individuals are baseless and they are not binding to the children of the former British Cameroon, because we went to the plebiscite to vote based on these promises. And those individuals that are maltreating us right now were not there. Therefore, their actions and their words are of non-effect. They have no value as far as we're concerned. Now, coming back to the when we had voted now to join La République du Cameroun, what happened is the Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld, who was from Norway, he was the one who was preparing the African countries towards independence. And he was an honest person. He said that joining the former British Southern Cameroon with La République du Cameroun is the same as putting an inflated balloon under the water in an ocean. One day that balloon will come out because the two don't belong together. The English and the French don't mix together. They don't go. And we have demonstrated that in La République du Cameroun. The two systems don't work. So that's what he promised. And he went to Congo to leave after helping the people in Congo to come to Boya to prepare our forefathers towards the meeting that where we will now sit to craft the constitution to keep the two countries. But it happened that his plane crashed and he died. I personally believe that he was killed by these conspirators, these people who wanted to hijack our independence. They killed this honest Norwegian Secretary General of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld. So the United Nations that owned us because we were a United Nations trust territory was not present to go and meet and craft the binding together of the two countries. Britain, that had already betrayed us and collaborated and conspired with the French in exchange for money, was not in Fumban. Only the French were there. And what happened was that when the British were withdrawing from our territory on September 30th of 1961, they handed the flag after they withdrew the Union Jack our flag. They handed it back to Ahijo. They did not hand it to Foncha, who was the voted operating executive prime minister of West Cameroon. They would have handed it to Foncha, and Foncha would take it to the meeting where we will sit to craft the constitution. However, the British rather handed it to Ahijo. That was one major aberration and demonstrates openly, frankly, how the British had betrayed us. So our forefathers now, compelled, were invited by Ahijo to meet in Fumban to decide on the form of coming together and the constitution. I want to talk about Fumban. So the Fumban, as people know, is a city in the western region of La République du Cameroun. And they are unique. People believe that they have a museum that people need to go and see. They even have their own handwriting and their own language that they have been practicing for years. And they have an animal symbol. I would like for us to look at that animal symbol. It is a snake, a python, a snake which does not have a tail, but it has two heads. And that snake can strangulate you. You can see it here. This is the animal symbol of the people of Fumba. You see this snake with mouths. It does not have a tail. It crosses the two heads, and then the body can strangulate you just like an anaconda or a big snake, or what we call in our local area Mboma, can basically squeeze the life out of any animal, like a goat or even a human. So they can strangulate you. Then on top of that, you see the spider. You know, the spider is very poisonous. There are some spiders that are so venomous that if they give you a sting, you will die right away. And some of them, you get a bad wound. So the snake is squeezing your breath by strangulating you, and then a spider gives you the deadly poison. That is the place where our forefathers went and met La République du Cameroun to discuss our coming together. And this symbolizes what they were planning to do with us. They wanted to squeeze the life out of the children of former British Southern Cameroon and poison them to death and own us like an anaconda will eat what it has killed. So they felt that they will take us to this place, finish us off, and then literally own us. That is what they were trying to tell us. And you can see this animal symbol in Fumba. And so what happened then, our forefathers went there, and Foncha, in good faith and with our practices, carried everybody representing our political groups, including the opposition. Ahijo just presented some of few of his ministers and some French advisors in Fumban, and they sat there discussing our coming together. And you can see a picture of Ahijo and Foncha sitting there and discussing, and our forefathers arrived. What they did to our forefathers in Fumban is that they prepared this is Foncha here with his coat and tie and the bow tie in his neck, representing the former British Southern Cameroon, and that is Ahijo on the other side with the black coat, representing the French La République du Cameroun, and in that meeting in Fumba. And what they did to our people is they prepared some special bungalows where they housed our delegation, each person in each one of them, and they made sure that there was strong alcoholic beverages in each of those bungalows. They had some beautiful Fumban women to serve them, and then make sure that they drink and get drunk, womanized by those Fumban women, so that they will not think when they come to the meeting. That's what this snake and the spider mean. Basically, they wanted to compromise the thinking of our people, make sure that they will not be thinking they will be drunkards, participating in the meetings, and just accept anything that they are told. And so when they went to the meeting, Ahijo said, according to the proposed constitution that we gave you, remember that Ahijo is under the full control, 11 strings tied to the French. So he is not a free person. He says, according to the proposal that we gave you, and our forefathers were surprised. They said, what? So there was some proposal that was given which we have not seen. Because what would have happened, they would have sat down read through it, deliberated, and decided whether they agreed with certain elements of it or not. And so, in that stupor of alcoholism and womanized by the Fumban women, they hurriedly just added some few points. They said, well, it will be a federation, like Ahijo was promising in front of the UN, and that this form of federation can never be changed. And that when one leader from one country is ruling, then the vice or the assistant, the second most important personality in the country, will be from the other side. And then they write some few things, and that's what was called the initial constitution. And from there, you realize that already it's a fraudulent document, because the major individuals that needed to sit down to discuss true crafting of an authentic document were not present. The United Nations that owned us was not there because they had just killed their Secretary General. The British that conspired with the French and had administered us since the Second World War, since they confiscated our portion of the former German territory from the Germans in around 1916. The British that controlled us until then were not present. They would have had to give an account. And if they truly cared about our welfare, they would have made sure that they negotiated for good terms of coming together where the interests of the children of former British were protected. But the British were not there because they had compromised and taken money. And the French were coming here believing that they owned us. Just like signed the 11-point agreement with Ahijo owning all of La République du Cameroon. So they believe that all our resources belong to them. All our money belongs to them. All the resources, just like they would do with anything in La République du Cameroon. That's what the French from Europe thought they would do with everything that belongs to the former British Southern Cameroon. And so that is how they came up with this fraudulent document. And because what would have happened never happened, that document is null and void. Now, La République Ahijo took that document to La République Parliament, and they just rubber stamped it like they usually do. They never had an opportunity to sit down, read it line by line, word by word, phrase by phrase, debate and discuss, dissect and adjust, and make sure that it was a good document that served the interests of the people of the land. They just rubber stamped anything. And usually, the way La République does, they give you bribes. So they give envelopes to those members of their parliaments, and they just rubber stamp the thing. This document was never presented to the Southern Cameroon Parliament or House of Assembly. Our forefathers in the assembly never read the document. They never debated the document. They never adopted the document. They never agreed with the document. And so it was never signed. And because our forefathers never signed that document, and it was only French La République that rubber stamped what Ahijo presented to them, there is no treaty of union between the former British Southern Cameroon, the children of Ambazonia, the children of the northwest and southwest regions of what La République called regions. There is no treaty of union between these two people. It is null and void. And you can never present one. There is no marriage certificate. So anyway, that's how our independence was compromised. And so we came together now thinking that we have had our own independence when it had been compromised. The Europeans knew what they were doing. They wanted our resources. They wanted not only all our money, anything that we have, they want it. Now the French are open. They write in these 11 points what the agreement is. The British don't say that, but they do the same thing behind the scenes, which is what they were doing with the English colonies. And that's why they wanted us to join Nigeria so that they will control that. But the French come out and write clearly what they are doing, while the British don't say that. They seem to have given some level of independence, but no, they don't. They control the economic people through international Freemasonry. They have the International Order of Freemasons and Rosicrucians. They have all kinds of secret societies that they have created to gather together all politicians around the world, indoctrinate them, manipulate them, so that they will confiscate the resources of the land for the welfare and benefit of those people predominantly in Western Europe and the Western world. That's the reason why dictators go and keep their money in Switzerland and invest it abroad. If you look All around the world, most dictators, they carry all their money to Switzerland. There's a reason for that. It's because of this manipulation, and actually the capital of international Freemasonry is in Switzerland, even though it started in Britain. But it's a different story. We will not go into that. That is how they manipulated our forefathers, compromised our independence, and then we have impostors pretending to be our leaders. They look like us, they pretend to be like one of us, but they are not serving our interest. They don't care about us. That's why they're always abroad. They carry all our money there. They invest it in Switzerland and keep it there. They've tricked them. They think that they have a lot of money, like billions of dollars. But they eventually die and they don't eat all of that money. When Mobutu died, they claimed that he had over $5 billion in Swiss bank accounts. But he had much more than that. Now, just the oil revenue that has been harvested from the land of Ambazonia, or the people of the Far British in Cameroon to date, is over $600 billion. I did not say billion francs, I said $1 billion. All of that money has been confiscated. The French negotiated and confiscated that oil for cheap. So while the Arabic nations were selling their oil at very high prices, La République du Cameroon never joined the oil producing nations and gave it to France for peanuts. And the agreement was that for every barrel of oil that is produced, the president will get 100 francs in his personal pocket. And at the peak of production, La République was producing from our oil in Limbe over 100,000 barrels a day. So multiply that by 100. That is how much money Biya was getting as some little cheap money from the French after they have taken away our oil a day. And then you can multiply by a year, just the oil, what goes into his personal pocket. All of that money has been confiscated, not to mention the wood that has been cut and many other resources like gold, and carried away to European nations, stashed away into bank accounts in Europe, in Switzerland, and invested across Europe, and they will die without ever eating that money. The purpose is to use that money to run the economies in Western nations, while our people live in abject poverty. Children are suffering, roads not done, schools not done, infrastructures not taken care of, young people not having jobs, and suffering just because what belonged to us that God gave us in our own land has been stolen and carried away and stashed away by these impostors and puppets of the conspirators. And so our independence was compromised. And so the first stage that I just talked about was how we were tricked into the plebiscite, and then tricked by Ahidjo lying, and then eventually meeting in Fumban, where they'll try to suffocate us and poison us and take off our head. In a subsequent program, I will go into the details of how our freedom was slowly chipped away. You will see how Ahidjo literally tried to do what the French wanted by undermining the promise, the pledge to maintain our cultural identity, our own political way of doing things. And they have done that continually till today. So we will talk about that. And so our forefathers met, and you can see how they thought they were celebrating and dancing, but actually it didn't go very far. So that will be the end of today's program, this initial set. I will come back in another program now to go into more details to describe how this independence was continually chipped away by Ahidjo in violation of his promises to us in front of the United Nations Decolonization Council. And I have already said, Ahidjo, who made the promises, is dead and buried in Senegal. The people making noise in La République du Cameroon were never there, never made those promises. Therefore, everything that they are saying concerning us, everything that they are doing concerning us is null and void. I want to emphasize again, everything that whoever their name is making noise about the children of British in Cameroon, in violation of these promises of Ahidjo, Anybody who was not in the United Nations Declaration Committee to listen to those utterances by Ahidjo, anybody making any statement contrary to the promises of Ahidjo, all those utterances, all those different actions and activities are null and void. I'll come back and talk how Ahidjo violated all terms of what he promised. And this characteristic of living in falsehood and telling lies remains with the Republic to this day. Thank you very much.